With releases happening so often, there really hasn't been a better time to be a gamer if you're into single-player titles. The PS5 especially has been a great place for fans of single-player games, especially since Sony itself has been focused largely on big blockbuster single-player games as its most important first-party releases. There are games other than first-party PlayStation games, however, and here are the best single-player titles that you can play on the PS5. Number 1. Lost Judgment. Lost Judgment shows a culmination of all the knowledge and practice the developer has gathered in its decades spent working on the Yakuza/Like a Dragon franchise. While the mainline numbered Like a Dragon releases seem to be going for a turn-based combat style, the real-time brawling that the series is known for is still alive and well in Lost Judgment. Throw on top some excellent writing that indicates some character development for protagonist Takayuki Yagami from its previous title, as well as a great story that revolves around the far-reaching consequences of bullying, and you have an excellent single-player title that can take around 23 hours to complete. More if you want to dive into the insane amounts of side content. Number 2. Returnal. Quite easily one of the highlights of the early days of the PS5's release, Returnal is one of the most unique takes on the roguelike genre that blends its mechanics with its story in interesting ways. Returnal is also quite easily one of the most challenging games on this list, and you're more or less expected to die quite a bit in your efforts to discover the secrets behind the White Shadow broadcast. Returnal taps into quite a bit of classic psychological horror tropes to tell a touching, personal story, and pairs that up with the excellent fast-paced third-person shooter combat with a host of unique weapons and abilities. Number 3. Marvel's Spider-Man Remastered. As far as superhero games go, the best thing about Marvel's Spider-Man Remastered is how it lets players really tap into the role of Spider-Man, thanks to the ridiculously fun movement mechanics. The fact that swinging around using webs actually makes use of some sort of physics, letting you gain momentum if you're really good at it, makes Marvel's Spider-Man Remastered an absolute joy to play. Thankfully, movement isn't all there is to the game, since Marvel's Spider-Man Remastered also features a touching story about the journey of Peter Parker, and his efforts to be a hero while trying to keep those close to him safe. Number 4. Marvel's Spider-Man Miles Morales. As a follow-up to Marvel's Spider-Man Miles Morales is a much shorter game. On the bright side, this also means that it's a much more focused title, cutting out a lot of the fluff from its predecessor's open world. It also features a shorter story with tighter pacing, more interesting characters, and ends up being a great example of a coming-of-age story. Miles Morales also gives players access to a more unique set of abilities that tap into the protagonist's abilities to tap into electricity, making the gameplay quite different from Marvel's Spider-Man. Number 5. The Last of Us Part 1. The original release of The Last of Us was quite easily one of the biggest releases for Sony, spawning into not only an excellent sequel, but also a critically acclaimed TV adaptation that has been bringing the game's story to a brand new audience. The Last of Us Part 1 is essentially a remake of the original game, while making use of the visual fidelity afforded to the studio because of newer hardware and the strides it made in developing the sequel. The Last of Us Part 1 ends up being the definitive way to experience the game's emotional story that focuses just as much on bombastic action as it does on tense horror segments, and quieter heart-to-heart conversations. Number 6. Death Stranding Director's Cut. Kojima Productions' first major release since going independent, Death Stranding might just be one of the most unique experiences out there on any platform, eschewing traditional game design conventions in favor of offering what can best be described as an in-depth hiking simulator. Death Stranding offers players a unique setting where humanity has been spread out and disconnected from each other, and where the humble courier is one of the most important and dangerous jobs out there. The director's cut release of the game brings with it extra content in the form of a host of new missions and story elements, as well as the ability to tap into modern console hardware for features like quicker load times and the DualSense controller's adaptive triggers. Number 7. Disco Elysium: The Final Cut. While the studio behind Disco Elysium might be going through some drama, the game itself can quite easily be considered one of the best written games out there. Disco Elysium: The Final Cut is a unique role-playing game where, rather than the combat, the game is designed almost entirely around having in-depth conversations with not only other people, but with disparate parts of your own character's psyche as well, with each stat being its own unique character. Disco Elysium offers a unique look into the human psyche that few other games even attempt. Number 8. Final Fantasy XVI. One of the biggest releases of 2023, Final Fantasy XVI features excellent combat and action mechanics. Final Fantasy XVI feels a lot more grounded and character-focused than other games in the genre. Throw on top some excellent real-time action combat, and Final Fantasy XVI might just be one of the best playing games in the genre. Final Fantasy XVI delivers an epic experience where the fates of several different kingdoms and countries are thrown into question, while also giving us big moments filled with over-the-top action. Number 9. Yakuza Like a Dragon. Ryuga Gotoku's first attempt at a turn-based combat system can be considered quite successful considering just how much fun Yakuza Like a Dragon made getting into fights. Alongside featuring its own unique take on traditional turn-based battles, Yakuza Like a Dragon also acts as the perfect entry point into the franchise thanks to it being starred by a brand new protagonist, Ichiban Kasuga. Yakuza Like a Dragon also tells an excellent story, with conspiracies going all the way to the top of the government, and features excellent side characters alongside its merry band of heroes. Number 10. Hogwarts Legacy. Hogwarts Legacy hopes to be the ultimate form of wish fulfillment for fans of the Harry Potter universe. The game takes place in the late 19th century and features a brand new protagonist that players can customize to their heart's content, who is starting their 5th year at Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. Along the way, players will uncover an ancient conspiracy and a brewing goblin rebellion, as well as make friends while attending their magic school. Hogwarts Legacy features a fun combat system and a lovingly crafted open world around Hogwarts for players to explore to their heart's content. Number 11. Bugsnax. One of the most adorable games out there, Bugsnax is unique in the fact that it doesn't really feature much combat. Instead, the focus is entirely on catching different bugs, who also happen to be made of different foods. Bugs can then be fed to different townsfolk to transform their bodies. Snaketooth Island ends up being an excellent setting for Bugsnax thanks to its decent variety when it comes to exploration. Bugsnax also features a fun, light-hearted story that makes it the perfect game to play with your family. Number 12. Elden Ring. Elden Ring is one of the biggest releases of the last few years, and with good reason. With the excellent transition of the game's Souls-like combat into a gigantic open world, Elden Ring offers plenty of room for exploration as well as experimentation. The combat feels responsive, and the level of challenge is tuned to near perfection as you make your way through the lands between. Elden Ring also features a host of characters, each with their own intricate stories that run parallel to your own progress through the game's central campaign. Along the way, there are also plenty of optional places to go through, letting you get your hands on a fancy new giant sword or a cool new magic spell. Elden Ring feels like the true culmination of everything developer From Software has been working on since the release of the original Demon's Souls back in 2009. Number 13. Resident Evil Village. Continuing the story of Ethan Winters and his family, Resident Evil Village takes us to Eastern Europe, where Ethan has to fight for his family against new terrifying enemies. Featuring a more combat-centric approach, Resident Evil Village gives players a great arsenal to play around with. Alongside the standard guns, players can also get their hands on traps and landmines to turn any combat encounter into a playground. Number 14. Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart. While the Ratchet & Clank franchise has seen only sparing releases, especially in more recent times, Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart can be seen as the crowning glory of the entire series. Not only does the game feature absolutely stunning visuals and a unique hook in the form of instantaneous travel between different levels, the game also brings back what the series is known for: insane and innovative weapons. Along with just being able to blast enemies with a standard gun, you can now also turn them into pixels or summon plants to keep them busy. Along the way, Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart also tells a touching story about friendship, family, and introduces a new Lombax in the form of Revette, who acts as the perfect mirror to Ratchet. Number 15. Horizon Forbidden West. Taking place 6 months after the events of Horizon Zero Dawn, Horizon Forbidden West takes protagonist Aloy to the eponymous Forbidden West, a world that is completely alien to her, and one from which no one has returned. Horizon Forbidden West revolves around Aloy having to deal with harsh, lawless lands ruled by the Tenakith tribes and more dangerous machines. Horizon Forbidden West acts as a classical sequel where just about every aspect of the original is refined and expanded upon quite a bit. There are more options for weapons and gadgets, more ways to traverse through the game's open world, and a lot more new and unique enemies to fight. From humans to robotic wildlife, Horizon Forbidden West also features some of the most gorgeous visuals in gaming, with incredible detail around every corner and a bright, vivid color palette. Number 16. Demon's Souls 2020. One of the launch titles for the PS5, the remake of Demon's Souls essentially acts as the definitive way to play the game on a modern system, featuring the same classic gameplay from the original, including the rough edges that would later get refined through the Souls franchise. Demon's Souls is unique among its contemporaries in offering a distinct level-based world design, especially when compared with the open world of Elden Ring. The remake still features the same intense hack-and-slash action that the original is known for, along with excellent level design, an intricate, if somewhat tedious, multiplayer system, and the in-depth world tendency system that changes levels in subtle ways depending on how well or badly you do. Number 17. Astro's Playroom. Being a free pack-in game for the PS5, Astro's Playroom is an excellent showcase of the console's different features. It's also just a fantastic 3D platforming game in its own right, featuring great level design and fun uses of the PS5's different features. Each level in Astro's Playroom is designed around highlighting a key feature of the PS5, from its new cooling system being the inspiration of the game's icy zones, to the SSD-inspired levels focusing almost entirely on speed. Astro's Playroom is also a great showcase of the feature of the DualSense controller, letting you feel its intricate haptic feedback and also making use of adaptive triggers for different aspects of gameplay. Number 18. Uncharted Legacy of Thieves Collection. Consisting of Uncharted 4: A Thief's End and Uncharted Lost Legacy, Uncharted Legacy of Thieves Collection is a fantastic package featuring some of the best gameplay that the Uncharted franchise has seen so far. Both games act excellently as standalone titles, but players that have played previous Uncharted titles will obviously get a lot more from these games, since it features a cast of characters that have grown alongside the players themselves over the years. Uncharted 4 acts as a sort of send-off for traditional series protagonist Nathan Drake, while Uncharted Lost Legacy tells a new story with a new set of protagonists and some unique twists on the classic Uncharted gameplay. Number 19. Dead Space 2023. The remake for Dead Space is quite easily the best interpretation of the game's industrial horror setting that we've seen so far. While largely unchanged from the original both in terms of gameplay and story, the Dead Space remake does make a few changes to the story that might only be obvious to those paying close attention. Gameplay balance, on the other hand, has also been changed, with developer Motive having done quite a bit to make more weapons viable through protagonist Isaac Clarke's journey through the bowels of the USG Ishimura. The remake of Dead Space might also be considered by some as one of the best-looking horror games out there, thanks to its phenomenal depiction of the game's visceral violence. Number 20. Star Wars Jedi Survivor. Taking place 5 years after the events of Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order, Star Wars Jedi Survivor puts players back into the shoes of Cal Kestis on his mission against the Empire. Events early in the game led to Kestis needing to call upon the aid of some old friends as he makes his way through different challenges each time. In terms of gameplay, Star Wars Jedi Survivor features a host of new combat options through the addition of new lightsaber stances, as well as new traversal methods that can be mixed and matched with the game's hack-and-slash Souls-inspired combat and Metroidvania-style levels. Number 21. Ghosts of Tsushima Director's Cut. Ghosts of Tsushima puts players in the shoes of the only survivor of the Mongol attack on the shores of Tsushima, Jin Sakai. The game features a massive open world for players to play around in, breathing in the incredibly atmospheric setting and partaking in some good old-fashioned samurai duels. Sakai can also adopt the ways of the shadows as he makes use of different gadgets and abilities to sneak his way through different villages in Tsushima to help liberate them from Mongol occupation. The director's cut release of the game brings with it sharper visuals, as well as faster load times. Number 22. God of War Ragnarok. A follow-up to 2018's God of War Ragnarok picks up 3 years after the events of its predecessor. Fimbulwinter has spread across Midgard, and it seems like the end of the world is near. Kratos and Atreus must set out on a journey and along the way meet new friends and old foes. Despite its greater scope, Ragnarok tells a more personal story about the pains of parents. On the gameplay front, Ragnarok features massive levels to explore as players fight their way through mythical enemies by making use of new combat options and abilities. Number 23. Gran Turismo 7. The latest entry in the sim racing Gran Turismo franchise, Gran Turismo 7, features the most refined take on the franchise's visuals and gameplay so far. Along with featuring hundreds of cars to race across plenty of courses, Gran Turismo 7 also features an incredible amount of single-player content through its different racing tournaments, competitions, and keeping true to series tradition, its license tests. Car fans will also find the game's expansive roster of vehicles that can be collectibles as a great way to sink hundreds of hours into the game. Number 24. Resident Evil 2 Remake. Although originally released for last-gen consoles, Resident Evil 2 Remake was updated to include enhancements for the PS5. If you own the previous gen version, then it can be upgraded to the PS5 version for free. Save data from the PS4 version can also be carried over to the PS5. The updated version features ray tracing support, higher frame rates, and 3D audio, along with the DualSense's haptic feedback and adaptive triggers. Number 25. Tony Hawk's Pro Skaters 1 and 2. A ground-up remake of the original Tony Hawk's Pro Skater and its first sequel, Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 1 and 2 features an expansive set of levels for players to flip, manual, and grind their way through. Along with featuring all of the levels from the first two games, Tony Hawk's Pro Skaters 1 and 2 also features an in-depth level creator, allowing players to create and share their own skate parks. The title proves that the arcade-style gameplay of classic skateboarding games still holds up to this day. There is also a host of customization options for players, allowing them to make their own skaters to take through the game's many levels. Number 26. A Plague Tale Requiem. Quite easily one of the most impressive looking games out there, A Plague Tale Requiem takes place 6 months after the events of A Plague Tale Innocence. Players take on the role of Amicia and Hugo as they continue their journey to try and find a cure for Hugo's condition. A Plague Tale Requiem features a combination of stealth-based gameplay as well as some hack-and-slash action for when things start getting too hairy. The game tells the rather personal story of the two siblings and their fight for survival. Number 27. Little Nightmares 2. A follow-up to Little Nightmares 2 expands the world of the original by taking players outside of the Maw. Players are put into the shoes of Mono, who is joined by the AI-controlled Six as they travel through the Pale City. Along the way, players will have to fight new enemies like the dictatoress school teacher. Little Nightmares 2 features similar gameplay as its predecessor while still expanding on the original's action combat with a host of new abilities and the addition of Six. Number 28. Control Ultimate Edition. Control puts players in the shoes of Jessie Faden, who finds herself in the offices of the Federal Bureau of Control in the hunt for her brother. Something has gone terribly wrong at the building. However, as a mysterious entity known only as the Hiss is breaking through the walls of reality and attacking the Bureau, Faden quickly ends up becoming the director of the Bureau and gets the ability to use telekinetic abilities, along with a shape-shifting gun to aid her in her search for her brother. Control features fast-paced gameplay as well as unique level designs thanks to the ever-changing walls of the Bureau. Number 29. Cyberpunk 2077. While it faced quite a rocky launch with a host of performance issues, Cyberpunk 2077 has since seen quite a few updates, making it into a formidable RPG with the well-realized dystopian cyberpunk theme of Night City. The game puts players in the shoes of V, who, thanks to a series of events including a heist gone wrong, has the personality of Johnny Silverhand implanted into their brain. V has to fight against corporate interests in their fight for survival, all the while making alliances and decisions that influence the game's theme to a great extent. Number 30. Watch Dogs Legion. In a departure from series tradition, Watch Dogs Legion takes place in a future version of London that has been taken over by technology and is ruled by private military contractors. The unique thing about Watch Dogs Legion is the fact that rather than putting players into the shoes of a singular protagonist, players are instead encouraged to recruit random people off the street into their cause. Players can play as just about any character they find, with each character having their own host of positive and negative perks, influencing how they play. Number 31. System Shock. The 2023 remake of classic first-person RPG System Shock might be considered by some to be faithful to the original to a fault. It still ends up being one of the most well-crafted RPG experiences out there. Stuck on a Tri-Optimum Corporation-owned space station, the player has to survive a hell created by Shodan, an AI gone haywire because its ethics regulators were disabled. Players will have to explore the Labyrinth space station as they lessen Shodan's influence throughout the space station, all the while fighting against horrors and robots being controlled by the evil AI. Number 32. Dead Island 2. Despite having a reputation of being an excellent co-op title, Dead Island 2 is also a fantastic game to play for fans of single-player experiences. Taking place more than a decade after the events of the original Dead Island 2 takes place in Los Angeles, where players can help curb the zombie population by making use of improvised weaponry. Playable characters include a stuntman, an athlete, and a motocross rider, allowing plenty of variety in characters and skill sets. Number 33. Like a Dragon Ishin. Taking place during Japan's Bakumatsu period between 1853 and 1857, Like a Dragon Ishin puts players in the shoes of Ryoma Sakamoto, a real historical figure played by the Yakuza franchise's traditional protagonist Kiryu Kazuma. Players will be able to explore an expansive city in the vein of classic Yakuza games, complete with a host of side activities and wacky sub-stories. Like a Dragon Ishin also features a complex story that involves not only the various criminal elements of the time, but also corruption in the Shinigami police force, all the while trying to get to the bottom of the betrayal faced by Sakamoto at the beginning of the game. Number 34. Evil West. The third-person action RPG puts players in the shoes of Jesse Rentier as he hunts down vampires and other mythical creatures on behalf of the government. The game makes excellent use of its Wild West settings, giving us a great example of a title in the Weird West genre. Evil West features action gameplay that can be quite reminiscent of titles from the Xbox 360 and PS3 generation of consoles, but it manages to keep it fresh by introducing modern gameplay features, as well as customization through a skill tree, giving players new ways to fight their enemies. Number 35. Sonic Frontiers. A new 3D entry in the storied Sonic franchise, Sonic Frontiers was quite a bit of a surprise for everyone through the expansive moveset it offers to protagonist Sonic. The game features an open-level design, setting players free in massive open zones and plenty of opportunities for Sonic to make use of most of his movement and combat capabilities. The story revolves around Sonic, Tails, and Amy finding themselves scattered across cyberspace. Sonic has to free his friends on his way to finding the Chaos Emeralds and destroying massive machines referred to as Titanus. Sonic Frontiers featured a ton of content for players, especially those who might like collectathon platformers, and offers a sense of speed and freedom that can only be matched by few other games in the genre. Number 36. The Quarry. A spiritual successor to Until Dawn, The Quarry puts players in the shoes of a group of camp counselors who are left alone at the camp after all the kids have been sent home. The cinematic game takes quite a bit of influence from classic horror movies like Friday the 13th. Gameplay in The Quarry revolves around nailing quick-time events and taking part in conversations between the various members of the crew, all while making choices that could mean life or death for the different counselors. There is quite a bit of replayability present in The Quarry, from the ability to hunt down all collectible tarot cards, to figuring out the right choices to ensure that everyone survives the harrowing events of the night. Number 37. Marvel's Guardians of the Galaxy. Putting players in the shoes of Star-Lord, Marvel's Guardians of the Galaxy tells an original story about the exploits of the eponymous Guardians, who became wrapped in a chain of catastrophic events. Marvel's Guardians of the Galaxy features unique fast-paced action combat, making use of Star-Lord's arsenal of weapons and gadgetry. The game also places quite a bit of emphasis on its story and interactions between the Misfit crew, and pairs it up with a soundtrack largely featuring a mixtape of music from the 80s. Number 38. The Dark Pictures anthology, House of Ashes. One of the releases in Supermassive Games' The Dark Pictures anthology, House of Ashes, follows the same cinematic style of gameplay that the studio has refined and perfected. Taking place in May 2003, House of Ashes revolves around a ruin where something nefarious and evil has awakened. Gameplay in House of Ashes revolves mostly around exploration and interactions with different characters, all while players make choices that could affect whether characters live or die through the game's events. Number 39. Ghostwire Tokyo. Ghostwire Tokyo offers players a unique look at modern-day Tokyo through the lens of Japanese folklore and myth. Put into the shoes of Akito, players have to figure out the mystery of a fog that engulfs the city and populates it with spirits known in the game as visitors. Ghostwire Tokyo gives players access to a host of different abilities, which essentially act as different weapons as they fight their way through iconic locations from Tokyo. Enemies in Ghostwire Tokyo are based on classical Japanese folklore, and each enemy has its own unique abilities and weak points. Ghostwire Tokyo also features an expansive open-world recreation of Tokyo for players to explore to their heart's content. Number 40. Origami 2. Origami 2 is a stealth-based game that is quite obviously inspired by the classic Tenchu games, putting players into the shoes of one of the last elite warriors of the origami. The game gives players a host of special stealth-based abilities as they make their way through the game's campaign. Origami 2 also features co-op for up to 3 players together, allowing players to unleash absolute chaos by making use of the game's fast-paced stealth mechanics, melee combat, and special abilities and ninja tools. Number 41. The Neo Collection. A collection featuring both Neo and Neo 2, as well as all of the content that's been released for both games, is an immense value in terms of the number of hours that you can get out of these games. Throw in the fact that both Neo games feature excellent gameplay inspired by the Souls franchise, while still managing to forge its own identity thanks to fast-paced action and a large variety of weapons and spells that the players can wield. And both Neo games become excellent ways to spend time. Both of the games also allow players to team up with friends through some excellent co-op. Number 42. Ghost Runner. A first-person action game that revolves almost entirely around fast-paced movement and traversal. Ghost Runner puts players in the shoes of the titular Ghost Runner, a cyber ninja who was left for dead after failing to stop an attack by a woman known as Mara, the Keymaster. Ghost Runner is an incredibly fast-paced game and tests how well players can meld the game's incredibly diverse movement options with fast-paced melee combat to pull off fancy kills. Interestingly, players will have to be careful, since a single hit from an enemy means death. Number 43. Sword and Fairy 7. Tapping into the classical art style, Sword and Fairy 7 is an action RPG that features fast-paced combat gameplay with a lot of options thanks to the players being able to equip each of their characters with unique skills. True to its genre, the game also features plenty of regular enemies to fight, as well as epic boss fights that will put your party of characters to the test. The story in Sword and Fairy 7 revolves around their relationships with each other. Number 44. Kena, Bridge of Spirits. An incredible visual showcase, Kena, Bridge of Spirits puts the excellent work of developer Ember Lab on full display. The game features standard hack-and-slash action and puzzle-solving gameplay inspired by the popular adventure franchises, while also featuring well-designed, unique characters, especially in its protagonist, the titular Kena. The young spirit guide travels to an abandoned village to look for a shrine, and along the way ends up uncovering secrets about the community. Kena, Bridge of Spirits, while still an excellent game, is something to be absolutely experienced thanks to its gorgeous visuals and animations. Number 45. Sifu. A martial arts-focused action game with a unique mechanic, Sifu is one of the most skill-intensive games out there. Out for revenge, the protagonist discovers the location of all the evil martial artists as they reach adulthood, and decides to take them out one by one. Along with featuring slick combat based on classic martial arts movies, Sifu also features a unique mechanic in how it handles the player's death. A death counter goes up by 1 every time the player dies, and death leads to the protagonist getting older by the level of the death counter. Getting older than the age of 70 means it's game over. Interestingly, the protagonist's stats also change as they get older, with damage going up but defenses going down the older they get. Number 46. Deathloop. Deathloop presents a fairly unique premise. Professional killer Colt and assassin Juliana are both aware that they're seemingly trapped in a time loop, on a strange island inhabited by a bunch of psychotic people who are obsessed with constant partying. Taking on the role of Colt, players have to figure out a way to take out every major target on the island in the span of a single loop. Players can also take on the role of Juliana to invade other players' games in an effort to stop Colt from accomplishing his goals. The gameplay in Deathloop revolves around sneaking around and getting into gunfights, all in an effort to not only upgrade your arsenal of weapons and abilities, but also to try and get more targets in a single zone, since traveling between zones takes up precious time, and running out of time means resetting the loop. Number 47. Fist, Forged in Shadow Torch. While there are plenty of titles in Metroidvania genres, Fist, Forged in Shadow Torch is unique in its wonderful realization of a cyberpunk setting, as well as its great use of its 2.5D environments in regular gameplay. Players are put into the shoes of Reita, who sets out to save his best friend from the Machine Legion. The game's story largely revolves around a secret rebellion brewing against the Machine Legion. Along the way, players will find new abilities that can be used in combat as well as exploration. Number 48. Stray. Stray has a simple premise. The player is put into the paws of a stray cat that is lost in a cyberpunk world inhabited only by robots. Along the way, players will meet a small drone named B-12, who is helping them accomplish their task of getting back to their family. The game doesn't really feature any combat, instead revolving almost entirely on exploration and puzzle solving. Stray's unique premise is backed up by its downright gorgeous visuals and wonderfully realized cyberpunk setting. Number 49. Moss, Book 2. The Moss series of games is unique in the fact that the player is a distinct, separate character from its protagonist, Quill. The sequel, Moss Book 2, takes place after the events of Moss, and tasks our heroine Quill with putting an end to the evil machinations of the previous game's villain superiors. Moss Book 2 is a unique blend of puzzle and action that puts players right into the game through VR, making them a distinct character known as the Reader, who is helping Quill out on her quest to rid the world of Moss from evil. Number 50. Metro Exodus. Acting as a sort of ending to a trilogy, Metro Exodus is quite easily the best playing game in the series. While the game loses some of the Metro franchise's identity, largely by not taking part in the titular Metro system at all, it still features a series of wide open levels that gives protagonist Artyom plenty of space and tools to play around with. The game also features a fun story that revolves around our intrepid group trying to find other survivors out of the confines of the Russian Metro system, and along the way getting into fights with enemies and cannibals. Number 51. The Pathless. As an open-world action-adventure title, The Pathless focuses on the hunter who ventures to a mysterious cursed island. Together with her eagle companion, she travels to forests, tundras, and extensive meadows, solving puzzles and ultimately coming across the corrupted beasts. Only by taking down the beasts can she lift the curse and ultimately save the world from darkness. The Pathless features a unique movement system combining precise shooting with fast movement for quickly traversing the map. Number 52. Grand Theft Auto 5. Despite being almost a decade old, Grand Theft Auto 5 is still a force to be reckoned with, featuring a massive single-player campaign that takes players all over the state of San Andreas. Grand Theft Auto 5 also features a host of side activities for players to take part in, from illegal races to just chilling out and playing tennis. There's even an in-game stock market that can be manipulated by players by taking part in side missions and various assassination missions. The amount of content in Grand Theft Auto 5 across all three characters can often feel limitless. Number 53. The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt. The critically acclaimed open-world RPG puts players in the shoes of Geralt of Rivia, a witcher who travels around the world hunting monsters for coin. Along the way, players will uncover various nefarious plots through in-depth side quests, as well as a host of fun monsters to fight. A notable thing about The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt is the level of moral ambiguity it emphasizes. No character is truly good or evil, and everybody has their own complex motivations for doing the things they do. The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt, along with its 2 DLC releases, features hundreds of hours worth of things to do for dedicated players. Number 54. Lies of P. There's been no shortage of reasons why Lies of P has generated as much buzz before and after its launch. The game offers numerous weapons to choose from, whether you assemble your own or discover unique armaments. However, there's more, as protagonist P can equip weapon arms. These offer additional abilities, from close quarters to long-range attacks, and become deadlier with upgrades. The story sees P, or Pinocchio, awakening to a city where the puppets have gone insane, slaughtering all humans. You must navigate the dark streets and find Mr. Geppetto to avert this crisis. P must fight for his life throughout, but he'll also meet various characters and complete side quests with the options to lie. Number 55. Armored Core 6 Fires of Rubicon. Armored Core 6 Fires of Rubicon may not be your usual Souls-like game, but you should not miss it. The story is set on Rubicon 3, a planet which faced an unprecedented disaster, long ago due to the rare material coral. Several decades later, coral has reappeared, and various megacorps and factions are fighting over it. You play a mercenary named C4621 who works with Walter's group, taking on different dangerous jobs. Armored Core 6 Fires of Rubicon features a variety of different modes. These provide tons of replayability and allow for pursuing different paths in the story, earning more money or taking on things in a new style. Number 56. Baldur's Gate 3. Ever since it entered early access development in October 2020, everyone has wondered when Larian Studios' Baldur's Gate 3 would release. Well, it finally released this year, and Baldur's Gate 3 has been nothing short of revelation. And in the days following its release earlier this month, Larian Studios' widely acclaimed RPG has enjoyed unprecedented success on all fronts. With that in mind, a regular playthrough should take about 75 to 100 hours, and there's a lot more to see, like the city of Baldur's Gate, and a lot to do. Number 57, Lords of the Fallen. This game's dark fantasy setting has, of course, looked like one of its stronger elements, with a variety of locations showed off from both of the realms that you'll be exploring, Axiom and its dark counterpart, Umbral. The game drives home that fact that, especially where its art style is concerned, it's continuing to look promising. The game also features PS5 specific features. With the adaptive triggers, the game is using different levels of resistance with each trigger pull depending on which weapon you're using. So unlike light weapons and crossbows, if you're using medium or heavy weapons or a bow, you can expect much greater tension in the trigger while you're pulling it. Additionally, when using heavy charged attacks, the trigger will stop after you've pulled most of it back, after which you'll have to pull it back the rest of the way to unleash your attack. Number 58, Marvel Spider-Man 2. 10 months after the events of Marvel Spider-Man Miles Morales, Peter Parker, Mary Jane Watson, and Miles Morales face new challenges. Peter reunites with his friend Harry Osborn for a new initiative, but things take a turn when Kraven and his hunters arrive in the city. There's also the mysterious symbiote, which chooses Peter as a host and grants new abilities at the cost of his well-being. Its playtime is about the same as the first game, but the world map has roughly doubled, with Queens and Brooklyn available to explore. You can also swap between protagonist Peter Parker and Miles Morales at almost any time. Number 59, Fort Solis. Fort Solis' story focuses on engineer Jack Leary, who investigates a routine alarm from Fort Solis. When he arrives, it's clear that things have gone wrong. Jessica Appleton provides support over the radio, but Leary is definitely in danger. It also stars Troy Baker, who plays suspicious medical officer Wyatt Taylor. Whatever is going on, Leary must investigate areas and learn more about what happened. Fort Solis plays with no HUD, camera cuts, or load times, and has multiple endings based on one's decisions. Developed on Unreal Engine 5, it looks excellent. Number 60, Wo Long Fallen Dynasty. Based on Romance of the Three Kingdoms, the game's story focuses on the fall of the later Han Dynasty and the rise of the Yellow Turban Rebellion. As a nameless soldier, you battle against the former while learning of a mysterious elixir that grants immortality. Despite many similarities to Neo, many elements set Wo Long Fallen Dynasty apart. Combat depends on deflecting attacks and critical blows, breaking enemies to inflict heavy damage. There's no stamina meter, and jumping allows for exploring environments more freely. Hey, did you know that we at Gaming Bolt upload new videos every day? Stick around, drop a like, subscribe, and hit that bell, and let us know what kind of content you'd like to see in the future with a comment below.